Wait, could this be a long weekend? Imagine that. Well, let me just be the latest one to welcome you to the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex. As Mark said, I flew in space 4 times. Here you can see my 4 mission patches. You notice they have one thing in common. Each one has my name on it. Now, it's not a very well kept secret, but if NASA puts your name on a patch, you're getting ready to have a real adventure. Now, I'd love to talk about all 4 missions, but we do have a limited amount of time, so I'm going to concentrate on my last mission up to the International Space Station. Now, the shuttle patches all had much larger crews, and here you can see there are only 2 names on our Expedition 12 patch. And there you can see the Roman numeral 12 in the background. Myself and Russian Air Force Colonel Valery Ivanovich Tokarev. Why only 2 people? Now, I want you to pay attention because there will be a quiz later. But Valery and I flew to ISS during a time in which the shuttle fleet was grounded following the Columbia tragedy. And without the shuttles flying, we could only keep enough oxygen, water, and food on orbit to support 2 people for an extended duration. And so the 2 of us flew on board a Russian Soyuz spacecraft. Now, here you can see the Soyuz on a rail system going out to the launch pad in Kazakhstan. It's a Russian vehicle. It was a Russian launch. But the Russians don't launch people from Russia, they launched from another country, Kazakhstan, and we returned to Kazakhstan as well. Here you can see our Soyuz being stood up on the launch pad, which is the same launch pad from which Yuri Gagarin launched to become the first human being to fly in space. That occurred on April 12, 1961. 1961? That was 62 years ago. Now, I'm just always thrilled to see so many young people in the audience because exploring space is about their future. You adults out there look pretty young to me as well. I'm confident I would be correct to state that the average age here is much less than 62 years. That means most of us have never known a time when human beings didn't fly in space. Well, here it is early in the morning. This is the launch pad. And Valery and I are going up the stairs to board our Soyuz. And there's a 3rd person. Does anyone know how to say stowaway in Russian? I'll get to that point in a minute. So, there's a countdown there just like we're used to. 5, 4, oh no, wait. 3, 2, 1, zажигание. Если вы полетите на российском корабле, обязательно говорите не очень плохо по-русски. Да?
No.
If you fly on a Russian spacecraft, you're obligated to speak Russian not badly, yes? Okay. So here we are, we go from 0 to 17,500 miles an hour, 5 miles a second in 8.5 minutes. And it is that smooth, just as smooth as you could see in the video inside the spacecraft. After 8.5 minutes, the engine shut off and you're weightless. Do you know how you can tell the rookie's on the crew? The rookie lets go of his pen and says, "My physics teacher was right. It floats." And you know how you can tell the veterans on the crew? We let go of our pens and say, "The laws of physics haven't changed, it still floats." Now, the Soyuz has 3 seats. I'm in the left seat, I'm like the co-pilot. Valery's in the center seat, he's the Soyuz commander. I turn to my right, shake Valery's hand and say congratulations. And to Valery's right is the stowaway. Okay, now wait a minute, that's not really fair. You can see he's got a spacesuit on, he's got an American flag, and he's got a name tag. This is Dr. Greg Olson. Greg is a New Jersey businessman, scientist, engineer, inventor. And he's really a very talented guy and a dear, dear friend of mine. As a matter of fact, I was just visiting him. My family and I were just visiting him in Princeton, New Jersey last week. But I know Greg's a good engineer because we trained together for 6 months and we flew in space together for 10 days. And his skills were every bit as good as a professional astronaut. He was great to have on the crew. But let's talk about that businessman part. He invented technology in the areas of fiber optic communication and infrared imaging. He then started companies to manufacture and market his inventions, and then he sold those companies for a lot of money. So much money that he paid the Russians more than $20 million to fly in space. Woo-hoo! All right, a good guy. Anyhow, so where were we headed? We were headed to the International Space Station. It was pretty small in those days. Kind of remember what it looks like here. Near the end of the presentation, I'll show you what it looks like today. So we orbited autonomously on our own for about 2 days, getting our orbits appropriately aligned. And during those 2 days, we didn't have much to do, so we just kind of relaxed, we just chilled out, enjoyed stretching out all the room inside the Soyuz, or not. Okay, people ask, what's the show at Soyuz like compared to the shuttle thing, Mack truck, MG midget. Okay, so anyhow, so after 2 days, here we are approaching ISS. We are located in the compartment that's at the center of the Soyuz. It's got 3 parts. There is no selfie stick out there, so who took the picture? Well, we were Expedition 12. Who might be really happy to see us? How about Expedition 11? Sergei Krikalev from Russia, John Phillips from the United States. We spent 8 days doing a handover. Okay, what's a handover? Well, those of you who are old enough to have graduated and gone and gotten a job, you remember what it's like. You show up and that veteran employee puts their arm around your shoulder and says, look, forget what they taught you in school. I'm going to show you how it's really done. Well, that's kind of a handover. Now, in actuality, of course, as you've heard, our training is really, really good. But the equipment we operate in space behaves differently on the ground in the presence of gravity. And so the experienced crew is showing us what those little differences are. So after that 8 days, Greg joined John and Sergei and returned to Earth in the Expedition 10 Soyuz. Now, I assume you've all been here for a little while today already. Question for the young people and the young at heart people. How many of you have bought a souvenir? Oh, moms, dads, that's a problem. The kids need souvenirs. No, I don't get a percentage of the profits in the gift shop. But the kids are going to go back to school in the fall. And a good souvenir is a wonderful way to introduce what they see and learn today to their classmates and teachers. So anyhow, now, because Greg paid a lot of money to fly in space, do you think he got a good souvenir? He did. He got to take the Expedition 10 Soyuz home with him. He got to take a real spaceship home. How cool is that? Would you like to see it?
Yes.
Go to New York City. The USS Intrepid Sea, Air and Space Museum. It's a retired U.S. Navy aircraft carrier which is docked to one of the piers in the Hudson River, Manhattan. The Expedition 10 Soyuz is on display in the hangar deck, and it's really a cool thing to see. Well, they've left. Larry and I have been training for 4 years. We have a lot of work to do. And most of our tasks are inside. We did a lot of science experiments. Here I am photo documenting how a liquid in weightlessness is separating into its 2 components. On the ground, scientists were photo documenting the same liquid to show how it separated into its 2 components in the presence of gravity. But every once in a while, we got to do something really cool. Here we are, donning our EMUs in preparation to perform an EVA. Not clear, huh? Okay, we're donning our extravehicular mobility units in preparation to perform an extravehicular activity. That's not much better, is it? Okay, we're putting on our spacesuits so we can go outside and do a spacewalk.
There you go.
All right. So, NASA does speak yet a different language. But anyhow, these suits were designed for use during the shuttle program. The shuttle crews were normally 5, 6, or 7. ISS crew normally would have been 3. And so the suits were designed with the assumption that the 2 astronauts going out would have someone to help them put the suit on and take it off. It's very difficult to do. So difficult, we had never allowed a crew in which there were no extra crew members to assist to actually do a spacewalk in these suits, and we never have since. So, we say spacewalk, but we don't walk. There are handrails all on the outside of the space station, and we go hand over hand along these rails to get to our location. Now, what would happen if you fell off? Well, could you fall? No, but you could float away. And if you floated away, you couldn't walk back. You couldn't fly back. You couldn't swim back. So we have something called a safety tether, a cable that goes through a self-retracting reel. By the way, our first task was to install this television camera. You can see I'm holding it in one hand. It weighed 200 pounds. I had been pumping iron in the gym a lot. But anyhow, so you can see the safety tether. If you lost your grip, the self-retracting reel, much like a self-retracting dog leash, would pull you back to the point at which it's anchored. Now we're back inside. This is one of Valeri's experiments. He grew green beans. I grew up on a farm. I love growing things. Now the farm I grew up on was a tobacco farm in southeastern North Carolina. So when I was a young boy, what were my summers like? I drove a mule-drawn sled. Mule, cross between a donkey and a horse. Really good farm animals, nice and sturdy, very patient, especially when for a 10-year-old boy's driving them. And so what I would do is I would walk beside the sled and with the reins, go up and down the rows of tobacco. The field hands would put the tobacco in the sled. When it was filled, I would go to the barn, we'd all load the tobacco leaves and begin processing them for market to be sold to the tobacco companies. Back to the field. Repeat all day. Which means I spent hours and hours in the hot sun looking at the south end of a northbound mule. So you might understand why I chose not to be a tobacco farmer. But anyhow, I had other opportunities. You know, the growing green beans sounds pretty neat, fresh vegetables. There's a problem with that though, right? We've all seen the science fiction movie. The astronaut goes to his little garden that's going to harvest some lettuce leaves for a salad with dinner, gets there and finds out the lettuce is mutated, and it eats the astronaut instead. Okay, all right, now for reality. Well, they didn't want us to eat the beans because the scientists wanted to analyze them to see if they had the same nutritional value as if they had been grown in soil. All right, well, speaking of nutrition, here we are at our dining table. This is the most important tool in the space station. What are these? Scissors. Why would scissors be important? I need them to open my smoked turkey. Valeri is preparing mashed potatoes with onions. We also had green beans with mushrooms and a cranberry apple cobbler for dessert. Turkey, mashed potatoes, green beans, something with cranberries. What meal do you think this was?
Thanksgiving.
Absolutely. Now, Valeri's a member of the Russian Orthodox Church. My ancestors were kicked out of the Scotland Highlands in the mid-18th century during something called the Highland Clearings, or clearances, when the landowners forced the peasants off the land so they could raise more sheep. Because of that, my religious upbringing was in the Presbyterian Church. Meals were a great time for us to share cultural values, our backgrounds, and what we did because we often worked in opposite parts of the space station. Now, a lot of the food is dehydrated, so you add water. And if you don't add enough water to the green beans, they won't stick to the spoon. Now, unfortunately, Santa does not have spacesuits for his reindeer. And so he has to use a Russian Progress resupply vehicle to deliver Christmas presents. And our single resupply came on December 23rd. Now, I told you there was going to be a quiz. Here it is. Imagine you have a friend on board the International Space Station, and you want to send her a present. Maybe it's Christmas, maybe it's her birthday, and maybe she's your girlfriend. What's something you might send her that's not nice to have, but is absolutely essential? Air, absolutely. What else?
Scissors.
Water, what's the third thing?
Food.
Food. Where does all that stuff come from? Because there's no public supermarket on the corner in space. All comes from Earth, right? But we also are very careful to make sure we don't waste these things. As a matter of fact, just recently we achieved a new milestone in which we were able to recycle 98% of the water. You know what that means, don't you?
No.
That means the water you used to make your coffee this morning is the same water you used to make your coffee 2 weeks ago. It just changed color twice. All right. So, but it wasn't just so much fun to celebrate the holidays. Gosh, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's in space. And so here are some of our decorations. Now, what character do you see here? Santa, that's right. My grandchildren, when I show them this picture, they see Santa. Valerie has a grandson, Yevgeny, Zhenya. Zhenya does not see Santa. He sees Ded Moroz, Grandfather Frost. In Russia, Grandfather Frost brings gifts to good boys and girls on New Year's Eve. And we actually celebrated Christmas twice in space because the Russian Orthodox Church observes Christmas as a purely religious observance on January 7th. The calendar we use, January 7th, corresponds to December 25th in the Julian calendar, which is what the Russian Orthodox Church uses to determine when their religious holidays occur. Well, in addition to a nutritious diet, we know exercise is important. You know, most exercise here on the ground involves fighting against gravity, whether it's running, jumping, all manner of sports. It involves trying to overcome the pull of gravity. Since we're weightless in space, how do we compensate for that? Well, here you can see Valeri's wearing a harness attached to these rubber bungees, which pull him on the treadmill deck with a force that's approximately equal to his body weight. What's the big international sports event going on for 3 weeks in July? The Tour de France, that's right. And so, today was stage 3. I haven't seen who won that yet. But here I am on my stationary bike, and I really wish I'd been up there during the tour because I could have gone faster than any of those guys. Anyhow, I guess I would be considered cheating. There's only one problem with that. They never would give me the code so that I could simulate riding downhill. Weightlifting is really important to maintaining strength, and especially skeletal strength. Of course, a barbell would be worthless in space because it would weigh nothing. We have what's called a resistive exercise device. And so I can set tension in these 2 cables, install some attachment like a bar, and do curls, bench presses, squats, a large number of exercises. And exercise was not important, it was important not only for health, but that we could maintain our strength and endurance for our next spacewalk. And this one we performed in a Russian Orlan spacesuit. Now, our mission was unique in that we got to do a spacewalk in each suit in the same mission. And because of that, people often ask us to compare the two suits. Well, I'll point out that the environment that we're in, the work that we do is the same regardless of the suit you're in, and therefore there are many more similarities than differences. And so the techniques that you use in one suit are the same for the other suit. And just like in the U.S. suit, you have to be, we're actually exiting the airlock here, so you can't quite see what's going on. But you really need to be very deliberate and make sure you don't get in a hurry to make a mistake. No, that doesn't look good. Now you can see why that safety tether is so important, because, oh no, there is no safety tether. Houston, there's a problem. Somebody is lost in space. I'm here. That must be Ivan Ivanovich. No, wait. There was no Ivan Ivanovich on the mission patch. So who is this? Well, we had an extra spacesuit. And so what happens is in the U.S. we have about a dozen spacesuits. Every couple of years we'll send refurbished suits up, bring the old suits back and refurbish them, and repeat that cycle. The Russians don't do that. They build new spacesuits. We'll send them up, use them for a couple of years. When their shelf life is over, they put them into progress and they burn up on entry. And so we had one of those obsolete suits we couldn't use anymore. We stuffed it full of dirty clothes and towels so it looked like a person. The ground couldn't see what we were doing, so Larry jettisoned it. And when he did, I keyed the mic and I said, "Help! You really are my audience." But I know skeptical laughter when I hear it. About 90% of what I said is true. We did have an extra spacesuit, we did jettison it, but we had attached a radio transmitter to it which broadcast a message recorded by young people from around the world in their native languages promoting world peace, hope, and friendship. And it broadcasts this message on an amateur radio, ham radio frequency, and again, orbited the Earth for about 6 months before entering. You know, talk about orbiting the Earth. Look how cool this blue and white thing is. That's our home planet. And at 17,500 miles an hour, we orbit once every 90 minutes. 16 times, 16 sunrises and 16 sunsets a day. People ask me, especially young people, what's my favorite planet? Easily, this is my favorite planet because it's the only planet we know of in which we could walk outside dressed in t-shirts and shorts and survive. And even if it's hot, be relatively comfortable. This is a wonderful planet. And there are lots of cool things to see from space. This is the moon's shadow. What's it called when the moon casts its shadow on the Earth? It's an eclipse. This was a total eclipse of the sun. The moon's shadow right here is over the northeast Mediterranean. The ground track of our orbit and the ground track of the moon's shadow across the Earth intersected, and we flew right through the shadow. It was pretty thrilling. We also see lots of big weather phenomena. We see all the hurricanes that are out there while we're flying. These are the Patagonian glaciers and the Andes Mountains in southern Chile. Rivers of ice that flow down mountain valleys. And cosmonauts and astronauts take pictures of the same phenomena on the Earth over and over again from over a period of decades. Scientists take these pictures and can study the changes to help anchor models such as those related to climate change. Arawanga Crater, Chad, North Africa. This is 11 miles across, 17 kilometers across. There are things like this all over the surface of the Earth. What causes this? A big rock. An asteroid or a meteor hits the Earth going really, really fast and punches a hole in the ground. This happens about once every million years. 66 million years ago, an even bigger rock struck off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. And what happened after that? The dinosaurs, a big extinction event. The dinosaurs became extinct. Okay, for you young people, if one of these hits this summer, you don't have to go back to school. All right, so all seriousness though, this happens about once every billion years. It is highly unlikely it will happen during our lifetimes. But we take these things seriously, and so we pay close attention to what goes on in our little neighborhood, our little part of the universe. As a matter of fact, last year we did a dual asteroid redirect test, DART, and we actually flew a small probe into a dual asteroid, a little binary asteroid, and we demonstrated that we didn't need to destroy an asteroid. If we just push it a little bit, just give it a little nudge, we can ensure that it doesn't hit Earth a few years down the road. Now, something a little more important, launching pretty soon will be the next SpaceX Dragon going to ISS. This is the Artemis launch pad. Here are the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station launch pads, vehicle assembly building, and you might want to take a picture of this with your phone because your cars are parked right there. April 1st, it is not an April Fool's joke. We look out the window and something is coming. What is it? Well, remember the Expedition 11 crew was really happy to see us. Guess who we were happy to see? The Expedition 13 crew. And so Jeff Williams from NASA, Pavel Vinogradov from Russia, Marcos Pontes from Brazil. 1 week doing a handover, and Marcos joined Valeria and me in our Soyuz. Soyuz has 3 parts. This center bell-shaped portion called the descent module is the only part that returns to Earth intact. And you can see the descent module is a little dot right there in the front. The other 2 modules are burning up during entry. 6.5 kilometers down under parachute, search and recovery helicopter says you're descending for a nice soft touchdown on target. What? Okay. So, you know, a lot of professions have what they consider cute, clever expressions, which everybody else finds annoying. In the aviation business, one of them is any landing you can walk away from is a good landing. Well, this actually was a flawless landing. It was absolutely perfect. The parachutes didn't even cause us to tip over. All that dirt and debris came from little rockets that fired downward and created these holes in the ground. But even so, because we had been weightless for over 6 months, Valeria and I could not even stand unassisted, let alone walk. And so we got picked up, put in chairs. Here you can see Valeria is drinking some hot tea, talking to the media. I'm just to his left on the sat phone talking to my family back in Moscow. And so my last adventure came to an end. So how about today or tomorrow? Well, this is what ISS looks like now. It is too big to fit on a regulation football field. To fit it, you would actually have to have 2 football fields side by side. We still go there using a Russian Soyuz, resupply with a Progress. After the shuttle program ended, we started using the SpaceX Dragon and the Northrop Grumman Cygnus to resupply. Anybody here from Virginia? Okay, well, the Cygnus doesn't launch from here in Florida. It launches from the coast of Virginia at the Mid-Atlantic Regional Spaceport. There are several spaceports in the United States now. Houston-Ellington Field is a spaceport. There are spaceports in Arizona and West Texas. So there are lots of places where people are going to start flying, from which people are going to start flying to space. Pretty soon we're going to resupply using the Sierra Nevada Dream Chaser and the Japanese H-3 transfer vehicle. Starting 2 years ago, we launched astronauts on board a crew version of the SpaceX Dragon from Pad 39A here at the Kennedy Space Center. Later this year, we hope to launch astronauts on board the Boeing Starliner, which will launch from the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station launch pad. Right now on orbit is Expedition 69. 3 Americans, an Emirati astronaut, and 3 Russian cosmonauts. An Emirati astronaut from the United Arab Emirates. I was Expedition 12. This is Expedition 69. Since I was there had been 57 crews. Wow. And well, why are we doing that? Because we want to go back to the moon and eventually on to Mars. And the rocket to take us there is the Space Launch System, and it will carry the Orion multi-purpose vehicle into space in a program called Artemis. Last November, we launched Artemis 1. It did 2 loops around the moon, flew for 24 days. There's the Orion, there's the moon, there's the Earth. After 24 days, the Orion splashed down in the Pacific off the coast of San Diego. Well, if there's an Artemis 1, guess what would come next? How about Artemis 2? And Artemis 2 will fly late next year or 2025. It will only go around the moon once. But there's going to be something very special about that one because it will have 4 people on board. Christina Cook will be the first woman to go to the moon. Victor Glover, the first person of color to go to the moon. Jeremy Hansen, a Canadian, the first non-U.S. astronaut going to the moon. And they'll be commanded by Reed Weissman. Wow, we're going back. So, before I take your questions, I have one. How can the sky be the limit when there are footprints on the moon? So if you raise your hand, Mark will bring a microphone to you so everyone in the audience can hear your question, and we'll see how many we can get through.
All right, raise your hand. Show me where you are. Keep your hand up, and I'll come to you and see if we can get your question first. Keep your hands raised.